Hello, friends and music makers. A very warm welcome back and welcome to this week's live stream, part one of a series covering theory fundamentals for electronic producers. Today, we're focusing on rhythm and how to level up your grooves from amateur to pro. I'll break everything down in easy to understand terms specifically for Ableton Live users. So feel free to jump in with any questions you have or share your ideas in the chat. My goal is to help you elevate your production skills and unlock your creative potential. So without further ado, let's dive in and take a look at today's stream. So I've got a little bit of a session view set up here, ready to rumble, to talk about rhythm. Rhythm is a dancer, rhythm of the night. We know that word quite well in music. And just a quick one, this is in response to a poll I did on YouTube a few weeks ago, actually asking the audience, the community, you guys and girls, what particular topics do you struggle with when it comes to music theory? And I listed rhythm, harmony, bass and melody, and all of those scored quite highly. It was quite close between all of them. So I thought, well, hey, what the heck, in the end, let's do a series and work our way through all those different topics. Let's do them in the right order as well, starting with rhythm as the foundation of a lot of those things, and eventually we'll get to harmonic rhythm and melodic rhythm as well, which are two topics that we're not quite going to dive too much into today because today is going to be beginner friendly. So let's just hit some drums for a second and make sure we've got some sound and then dive into all the different good stuff about rhythm. I might just put a limiter on the master track just so we can make sure we've got a nice healthy bit of juice for YouTube. We'll just bump that up slightly. We can even go a little bit higher. We'll start around there. So that's a little nice 808 sort of house groove there. Hopefully you can hear the microphone fine and you can hear those drums fine. Alex Moreno, you're with me bright and early, 7 a.m. where you are. That's commitment for sure. And thank you for your comment there. You're welcome as far as another stream and another lesson goes. As I said, you know, very, very welcome on that side. So I hope you've got your coffee fired up. I've got a tea here. So let's dive into everything we can kind of unpack in today's stream on rhythm. As I said, so rhythm's the foundation, we could say, of a lot of the music we make. I'm just going to read you a definition here. So I'm looking at my other screen over to the left. I think this explains it really well. Rhythm in music refers to the pattern of sounds and silences that occur over time. It is created by the timing of note and rests. What are rests? Rests are another way in music to describe those silences where we have a pause, which gives music its structure and its flow. You can think of rhythm in music as a free spirit, because out of all the different components that make up music, rhythm is one that's the most independent and it can stand on its own 2 feet. So if we're thinking about a great rhythm in a drum kit or something like that, that can stand on its own without a melody, a bass line, or a harmony, where some of those other things depend a bit more on each other. Also, it's the part of music that reacts most immediately and spontaneously with our bodies, right? It's so often when I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about kinetics. I'm thinking about that connection to our body and our movement. If I'm making music for the club and for the dance floor, if my groove is good and my rhythm is good, then people are going to want to dance and I'm going to want to get out of my chair and start moving around in the room. So, you know, think about stuff like that. One of my favorite producers, Special Request or Paul Walford, he taught me many years ago that he has this little chair test thing that he implements himself in his music workflow. If his track idea and rhythm and groove doesn't get him out of the chair, and moving around, then it's not for the keep bin, it goes into the recycle bin. So yeah, a fairly important thing. So let's look at a few of the terms. So again, as I said, beginner friendly here. What are some of the terms that we come across in rhythms? Also, if you are in the stream with me today, let's make it interactive. You know, I'd love to hear from you. I'm going to ask some questions. If you want to answer them, that would be great. So we can make it kind of interactive, make it like a class. It is a bit like a class. I feel like today I'm presenting my best effort I can of rhythm to a room full of electronic music producers and saying, this is what I've learned along the way, and this is what I think you should pay attention to as you go. So rhythm terms. Let's start with, before we even play a sound, what influences kind of rhythm in our Ableton Fresh project or project window. We've got our global tempo, which is going to decide, you know, how fast our rhythm is going to be. Okay, so we can do that just with a metronome before we even start making any beats or anything. So we've got our global tempo, and then we've got some terms that we can deal with here. We've got measures. So if someone knows what a measure is when it comes to rhythm, drop that in the chat, let me know. What about beats? Again, if we're thinking sort of in rhythm terms, in a bit of music theory for a second, what are we meaning if we refer to this measure and this many beats? That could be something good to see if someone knows and wants to drop in the chat. Then we're going to break down, what are all these terms mean? What is the downbeat? What is the offbeat? What is the backbeat? And what is the upbeat? And a couple of quick things as well. I'm going to be using drums today as the explanation of rhythm. I think it's a great place to start because, again, a lot of us electronic producers, we start with drums and we start with building up our groove and rhythm with our drum kits, and we choose a tempo and off we go. So let's start with measures. Measures is a way just to literally describe how many beats so we could say we have one bar, that's our measure, and we've got a certain number of beats in that bar. And that ties in very nicely to the time signature that we have up the top here in our DAW in Ableton 4/4. Now, I'm not going to go through today lots of different time signatures and change from that. I'm going to stick things to things nice and simple. House and techno, most of electronic music and a lot of music is in 4/4. So we could determine from that time signature that a 1 bar measure is going to have 4 lots of 4 strong beats. And that's where the beats comes in. So again, if we're talking in beats, we could describe a 1 bar measure as, in this case, in a 4/4 time signature, having 4 strong beats. So again, if we turn on the metronome and hit play, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and away we go. So that is terms that you're going to hear quite a lot, measures and beats. It helps us know what is going on inside of our bar of MIDI or audio in this time signature of 4/4. Coming downwards, downbeats, offbeats, backbeats, and upbeats. Well, let's look at that, and let's look at that a little bit in the form of, maybe we can go and grab a breakbeat. So we're going to go and get some audio here, grab ourselves a breakbeat, a real beat. So let's have that. Actually, wrong folder I'm in there, but that's all right. So let's come down here and let's grab ourselves something like this. Drum break over here, and let's get that in. Got a little bit caught there with where I was trying to put my mouse. Okay, so we've got this real world drum break here. Okay, and if we're looking at this drum break, as we go through all the different divisions and beats on here, we could describe some of those divisions by these names here. So again, if anyone wishes to drop in the comments there which one is the downbeat, go ahead, let me know. I know there's a bit of a delay with that. Offbeats, backbeats, and upbeats. So if we play through this drum break over here, we're essentially covering all those different terms. So if you're searching for the downbeat, you are searching for where does the drum pattern, in this case, or rhythm, begin. And the downbeat is often referred to as the 1. So this is the start of this loop and start of this pattern here, and groove and rhythm. This is the downbeat here, okay? So you can see if I stop the loop and I re-trigger it, it's going to start from that downbeat. Okay, so that's a fairly important beat in rhythm and groove, because it's like, as I said, where our measure or where our phrase, if it's a longer than a bar or 2, 4, 8 bars, it's where we're starting from, and we're saying this is the very first beat, our downbeat. So if we look at the next one there, we could actually, let's take out of there the backbeat, which is the third one down. So backbeats are even beats. So in this groove here, we have on the 1.2 in this first bar and the 1.4 backbeats. And those are typically places where you're going to hear, in this sort of pattern here, a snare drum happen, or a clap, something like that. In this case, it's like a snare falling on those backbeats. Nice. So backbeats. Offbeats are in between, and they're all the little beats that are going on. So if we were looking here, this is just one quarter note here. Okay. So if we want, we can actually change our grid so you can see what I'm speaking about. So if I divide that up and I put it into quarter notes, that's one whole quarter note there. And you can see inside that quarter note, we've got the downbeat, but we've also got 3 other beats, right? So if we divide it up by changing our grid to smaller sizes, 8ths and 16ths, we start to have other beat divisions, right? So all of those grid lines there are currently 32nd notes. Let's make a 16th. So we could have 4 different 16ths here, and these ones here, the 3 that are not with the downbeat, they are what are called offbeats. Alex Moreno, great to hear it was loud and clear. Sorry, thank you for letting me know. Downbeat is the strongest accent, I believe. Well, it's the starting of this particular pattern and phrase. As I said, it's a very important beat because it's deciding where our 1 is. It's deciding, in this case, where this loop starts. Now, we could move where the loop plays from. If it plays from here, it's playing from another beat in that pattern, but actually, technically, the real downbeat of this particular pattern is where the playhead already was in that loop, which was over on the 1. So you can actually, it's a great way to make loops your own, is to move around and play from different positions. Over here, we could be playing from another downbeat. That's the start of bar 2 right there. So yeah, it's an important beat to learn to understand where it is. So if we're just not looking at this pattern and we're counting the metronome, we should be able to count whenever we hear a 1. And we are very fast at this as humans. It doesn't even matter if you're not a music person. So if we turn off this and we're listening for the pattern, you should be able to come into that metronome at any point and say there is a 1 somewhere. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you're DJing, you'll be very, very familiar with that, because again, it's super important to be able to understand where is that downbeat. So here with the metronome, I'm listening to the downbeat in my 1 bar measure in 4/4. I hear the 4 strong beats being identified, and I need to be able to pick out that 1 each time to understand. And if you're warping, working with acapellas, recording in some chords to go on top of your drums or something like that, you want to understand where that's coming around so that you can understand where to start on that downbeat. Okay, so offbeats, all those lovely little beats that fall in between our backbeats and our downbeat, or downbeats, as I said in this case, because we've got two bars where we've got a clear downbeat. Then what else have we got? Not much more. We've got the upbeat. That's often referred to as kind of the final beat of, in this case, this pattern over here, again, as it's 2 bars where we get the final beat. And it's also, if you're a real drummer, you'll think about lifting your foot up, and that's kind of the move. So upbeats can be where the foot comes up off the pedal of a hi-hat or off a kick, and then the downbeat is when you go down on those pedals on the drum kit. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. So those are little references you're going to hear often. I think the most important one to understand, particularly for today and in the future, are down and off beats, okay? Because like I said, that finding the down beat is helping you if you're a DJ. Finding the down beat is good if you're working with this drum break here, because we might want to use that in our track and we need to understand where we think the downbeat is so we can get it in time with the rest of our music. And backbeats and upbeats, as I said, it's just good to perhaps know what those terms are, but they're not going to be, you know, they're not something to sweat on too hard. All right, so moving along from there to the don'ts. We've got to love some don'ts. Okay, so we're talking about rhythm today. We're talking about trying to make like really good rhythm, understanding what it is, and good groove. We're using drums as our example to learn rhythm, and we're looking to skill our drum programming and have really good rhythms and grooves, captivating ones. So too much quantization, that is a don't. We're going to look at this Kool and the Gang drum break in a second because it's a good example of that point. So don't over quantize audio or MIDI, because if you do, you will end up with a robot. You'll end up with something that is absolutely perfect with absolutely zero soul and zero feeling and zero rhythm and groove. We're going to look at what breaks can teach us about that in a very short second. Too much repetition, classic one. So in our rhythm, we want repetition, but we want variation. And it's the balance between those two things that are the most important thing. So too much repetition, we're going to get bored, we're going to check out, and we're going to say, we don't want to carry on with this. Not enough dynamics, another super important thing. If someone knows what dynamics are, drop it in the chat here. As I said, wanted to try and make it interactive today with like a classroom, questions, answers. Let's get our thinking cap on here and learn and understand what's going on. So not enough dynamics. Too much on beat. Lots of quarter notes, lots of eighth notes, all elements playing the same pattern, ignoring the spaces in between. So coming back again, don't forget that rhythm, it's almost as important as the beats that are occupying some of the space are as important as the silence in between those. That's what gives us our kind of groove and rhythm and feeling. So don't ignore spaces in between as an important tool in this, so you can populate it with as many sounds and beats as you like, but silence is just as important. So let's look at what breaks can teach us about too much quantization. Because if we have this drum break over here and we wish to use this drum break in an electronic track, let's say, there's a bit of an issue in the sense that I can already visually see that it drifts out of time. It's a human drummer, and so this is played by real people. Kool and the Gang, in fact, played this drum groove, and it's got lots of beautiful things about it, and it can teach us about how not to over quantize something. Just going to check in the comments. Alex Moreno, dynamic are the volume changes or different, for example, some sound being soft like a piano or pad and a sound being hard like a kick. Absolutely spot on. I would describe the last bit of what you're speaking about there as velocity. So we're going to bang on a lot about that. The first thing for me with the dynamics, and especially with drums, rhythm and groove, velocity. Can't stress it hard enough. We as humans, if we're playing drums, we are not a robot. We're not going to hit that drum the same, even if we try, we're not going to hit it as hard and as soft every single time. It's going to vary how hard and soft we play those drums. So if you want natural, real sounding drums, you're going to want velocity changes. Some people think about velocity as volume, but it's not technically, because volume is amplitude and gain. It's how soft or how hard we are playing those notes. Okay, that's the dynamic. So well done, Alex, on that. So if you look at this drum pattern from Kool and the Gang, we can see in here a lot of velocity differences, because if velocity is all the same, all these hits would be the same amplitude. So we can see where the loudest, that's the loudest beat in this groove, and the softest is down in here, right? So of course there are different sounds in the drum kit. These are sort of kicks and snares that are the loudest, but there's a lot of dynamics in this groove here, which is what makes it sound like it does. If we play it right now. So let's slow things down for a second, just on the tempo here. We'll go right down to 120 for a second, just up on the global tempo here. And let's pop on the metronome and we'll listen to the two together of this drum groove with the metronome. Just bring the drum groove down a little bit in volume. So this isn't going to be a warping masterclass, but if I wanted to put this drum groove in time here, there's a couple of sort of quick moves I could do here just to tighten this drum groove up a little bit, and then I'm going to explain that back to don't over quantize, because if you're working with audio like this and this beautiful drum loop played by Kool and the gang, we don't want to spoil what's good about it. We want to preserve that as much as we can. So if I'm already happy that Ableton's done it for me, it's put the downbeat on the 1, we agree that's the downbeat, and then we've got sort of significant events that have been marked by these transient markers, which again Ableton's done for me. And I can see on bar 2 where the downbeat is here, it's very, very late. Comes a lot later than the grid, and this is where we start to get a lot of drift. And if we keep going in bar 2, this is a snare here and it's falling further away from the grid. So thinking about here, I'm absolutely going to turn 2 into a warp marker and bring it and snap it onto that bar 2, so my downbeat is in position. I quite like the snare on 2.4, it's a little late, but it's okay. So I'm just going to bring the one on 2.2 across, just using the transient marker like that, and nudge that to the line. Go back and check my 2.4, that's now really good. And then if I look into the first bar, my 1.4, it's a little bit late, but it's pretty tight. And the 1.2 is slightly earlier than the grid there, is what I'm paying attention to here. So as I said, not a warping masterclass, but a couple of little warp markers here, and I've tightened up this groove. Let's listen with the metronome now. And it's nice and tight. And what I want to tie this into is coming back over to don'ts. Breaks can teach us about not over quantizing. So another thing that I'd really like you to practice doing in your own workflow is playing stuff in, using your MIDI controller, using a push, and playing your drum sounds, playing your basses, playing your instruments along to the metronome or to your drums, and start using that, because the funny thing is that's a lot actually quicker than programming drums with the mouse, is to play it, record it, capture it, and then afterwards decide what needs tightening up and what doesn't. And you can choose just notes on their own or groups of notes, or you can leave it completely alone. And what you're doing there is adding natural rhythm, adding natural groove, swing, and all the good things just by playing it in. And okay, it might not sound great the very first time you do it, but we've got lots and lots of tools here where we can, like I said, after we've played it, correct things that didn't work out, keep the things we like, correct the things we aren't sold on. So breaks can teach us, or this loop here, that actually we don't want to go in and fix absolutely everything in this clip here. We want to preserve all the beautiful natural dynamics, timing issues, all of that, because that's what makes this break actually unique and special. It's not about turning it into a robot. So just to prove my point there, let's put that in, and let's put it with some house drums. We'll turn off the metronome. It plays quite nicely with that kit, or this garage kit over here. Plays really, really nicely without actually going crazy and preserving everything that's great about it. 2 markers to tighten it up. So it's teaching me there doesn't have to be everything perfectly quantized, because in all reality, we can go and grab the very same drum loop, bring it over again. And what we can do is go into Ableton's tools here. So this is something that maybe some of you are not aware of in audio. We can go into here. We can go into this section of the envelopes here. We can turn on the grid if we like, but the grid is too small. It's 1/32 notes. So let's change our grid in the back of the loop here. I'm going to use Command 2 to do that, to turn it to 16ths. You can also right-click your mouse if you like and bring up a little menu, and then you can choose from there down the bottom here 16ths. But for me, it's a lot faster using Control 1 and 2 to resize that grid. So now I can come over to Quantize, turn on the grid here, and that means that if I move the quantize amount and apply it, it's going to snap all of these sort of events to the nearest 16th. So everywhere we've got a 16th, it's going to snap the audio to that. So let's do that. We'll have the grid on 100%. I could also do that, by the way. So you could also, you don't have to resize the grid. You can just choose if you've got the grid size you're looking for in the background there. But we're going to do that. Hit apply, and you can see it's done that. So it's done everything perfect. So it's taken our friends from Kool and the Gang and their disco playing real live drumming live drum break, and it's put it bang on the grid with everything super tight. Missed one over here, but that was because there wasn't a transient marker there. So if we wanted, we could kind of do some correction on that ourselves, but maybe we'll just leave that one alone for now, see what it sounds like. But we've now got a very, very, very quantized loop. So let's play that. Let's listen to that, color it up different, and go to this one. I'm deliberately doing them without anything else for a second. Now let's put them with some drums. So I'll let you be the judge, but I know which one I prefer and I know why, because it's giving me all the feeling, all that rhythm and groove that it had right from the get-go. It has all the ingredients we're kind of looking for when we're trying to make a professional drum groove. Okay, we're maybe making it for electronic music and we're inside a DAW, and this was a live drumming, who knows, on stage in a studio being recorded, but it's got all the lovely timing differences that make it human, all the dynamics of velocity, and it's not over quantized. And so if I'm going to work with it myself, I'm not going to over quantize it. I'm going to look for the minimum amount of correction I need to do to make it accessible to be used with what else I want to use it with. And tips for doing this, as I said, it's not a warping masterclass today, is looking for strong beats, back beats again, and down beats and things like that, that you might find you just need to tighten up one of those as it's drifted out of time, and that might fix the whole clip and you don't need to do anything else. If you find yourself down in here somewhere moving these around, I would suggest it's game over and you've kind of lost your way and you're taking away all of the good stuff that's here in this loop, and you'll end up with that. But if you want that, like I said, Ableton's got all the tools built in, ready to rumble. And just to point out, it's not only drum breaks like that. So if we are working again with audio and we're jumping in and we're using a favorite sample pack of ours or a sample pack, doesn't matter what, and we're working through and we've got some top loops. And we grab these top loops over here. This is from a Defected in the House pack. Here's a house top loop. It looks like this. Again, if we wanted, we could handle it exactly the same like the drum break. But again, it's probably got lots of, sometimes some of these loops have their own, again, little quirks of little timing changes. It certainly has lots of dynamics. And so I wouldn't quantize those unless I absolutely need. And what I actually like to do is leave that like it is, because it's adding to my track its own kind of groove and rhythm. And so actually when you start layering those up and you leave them alone, then you don't again end up with this stiff, robotic, flat sounding rhythm and groove with your drums, because these little loops that this producer made, copyright in this case, they all have nice already variations in them, and when you start layering them together you get all that good stuff working together. So if we put this top loop and all together, put our tempo up a bit. It's actually good what's happening here. Everything's kind of vibing in its own way and giving us more feeling than if we were to go back and start making everything perfect. So I hope that's translating and you can hear what I can hear. And maybe there's someone there that prefers how stiff these two are in comparison to these two. But for me, when I start listening to the music, that's got me moving, and that's what we're talking about. So that's a bit of a deep dive about what loops and audio actually and drum breaks and things can teach us, is that we can hopefully, by doing this little test and shootout that I've been doing over here, you can start to hear about what too much quantization and too much perfection can do. And it's not good, it's a don't. You know, the more you can kind of, especially if you're working with breaks, leave them alone, the better off. The more you're going to actually take what's special about them and use them in your tracks. Similarly to sample pack loops as well. If we don't need to quantize them, it's actually good if we're working with different loops from different packs to leave them alone, because like I said, they end up sort of vibing off each other and you're getting little bits of interest and groove from each different pack and each different loop. Only tighten them up if you feel it's not working. It's not working with what else you have. So maybe over here I've got a techno groove. So maybe you want this tighter loop. That might be an option where you want this very quantized, kind of tight feeling, as opposed to that looser, unquantized. It's up to you. So there are examples where you might be going for the little bit more quantized. So it's really up to you. So there's the don'ts, okay? We might come back and look at those in a little bit, but pretty important list there. Just noticed as well, my OCD is going to hurt me here. I better fix the spelling there in case you are looking at that and judging me. By the way, if you are here in the stream, as I said, try to make it a bit interactive today. It's rhythm, how to make better rhythms, more interesting, more compelling grooves. We are using drums. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat, say hello, all those good things. So let's fold up the don'ts, and now let's start looking at the do's. And also, we're going to pop away those two tracks now. We don't really need those anymore. We also don't need our rhythm terms so much anymore. We can bring those over a bit, bring our browser in a little bit. Okay, so if we're making our own grooves and rhythms, we sort of touched on don't. So the opposite of that is drums that sound human. So we had that in those beautiful drum breaks a second ago. Natural sounding, not mechanical, tying into the same thing. And we talked a little bit about before, which Alex answered in the chat there, about dynamics being super important. And as I said, I can't bang on enough about velocity being the key to that. And also, by the way, we are using drums here, but this applies to not just drums. Everything we're going to look at today applies to chords, vocals, bass lines, right? Rhythm is a part of all those. The advanced harmonic and melodic rhythm we'll look at in a future video, but that's not where we are today. We're in the basic sort of beginner friendly window. So velocity, can't stress it enough, super important. So while we're looking at that, again, let's do another shootout, right? Because we want to make sure we're getting this, and hopefully you heard in those breaks and that top loop the differences between quantized and not. Let me know if you didn't, but hopefully you did. So I've got 3 different drum kits here, and I've got, as you can see, a clip A, B, and C. What does that all mean? Well, there's a drum rack, right, on each track. There's a garage drum kit, there's an 808 core kit on this one, and over here we've got a techno kit. So I've programmed a pattern for each of those reflected to the sounds in those kits, right? But there's a difference between A, B, and C. And I want to see again, or hear from you guys and girls, can you hear a difference in these clips? And if you can, what is that difference? So let's start with the techno kit and let's go from C playing up to A. So I'll let it run for a little bit and then I'm going to move on, right? I'm going to chronologically start playing C, then I'm going to move to B, and then I'm going to go to A. What I want you to do is let me know, is it A, B, or C that you prefer? And then also, if you would like, let me know what you think is different in A, B, and C. Okay, actually, I'm going to change my mind, exactly the same, sorry, as I just said, but let's start with the garage one because I think it's more obvious. Like, as I said, the techno one's a little more subtle, the house in the middle, somewhere in the middle. The garage, I think it's more easier to hear what is different about these three. It's the same workflow. Try to hear the differences and then let me know which one you prefer, and let me know, if you can, what is causing those differences. So let's start with C on the garage kit. On to B. On to A. Do a quick run through again. Let's jump from A to C. To B. So I must point out the biggest differences, of course, hopefully it's obvious, are between A and C, okay? B's got a little bit of a change from A, and then C has the biggest change. So not sure if there's anyone there who wants to try and have a go at that and answer that. Let's do another example in case you want a moment to think about it. Let's do the house and we'll do the same. Let's start with the C on the house beat. All right, so I'm not sure if anyone wanted to have a go at that, but essentially what I'm trying to show you here again, or work out here in a shootout, is how important some of those things we just looked at with the audio and the drum break are. So what I've done is, as I said, on these 3 tracks, we've got 3 drum racks and we programmed a groove, okay? So A, funnily enough, is the groove here that has the most naturalness to it. It has the most work on it. It is not quantized. It has plenty of dynamics through the velocity down the bottom here, which we can see. So we can just for a second get rid of the chance lane. This is the velocity of all the different drum hits in that groove. So there's velocity, dynamics going on, and there's also little bits of timing imperfections in there potentially, yes. So we can see this snare down here is a little bit late. It hasn't been snapped to the grid. So there's vibe here, okay? And there's velocity. That's why that note there is a little bit lighter in color. These hi-hats also vary a little bit in terms of note length. So there's not perfection there. And I think if I didn't say it earlier, it's easy to do perfection in a computer. And if we're programming our beats, we need to think about undoing. And it's why, again, I also stress that if you start playing on a MIDI controller or a push, you can learn actually how to do it. It's actually easier and quicker once you get over the confidence and playing it and making things sound the way you want. So when you're programming and stuff, you want to think about that, because it's easy to do perfection. We can do perfect beats all day long, but it's not perfect beats or perfect grooves or perfect rhythms that we're sort of drawn to. So A is the standout clip. B is where I removed any of the timing differences. So essentially everything is snapped to the grid. So I quantized the B. Okay, so the velocity is still there, but quantization is everything bang on the grid. And then C is with the velocity removed and the timing removed, right? So C is what, when we're beginning, often a lot of us do, because we're not really aware of all those other good things that we're going to learn as we go today. So we make this drum groove down here. We're pretty happy about it. And it sounds decent because all of the sounds are interesting that are being used, right? So we've got kind of like, you know, different sounds on different pads. Not kind of sure why we're not getting a preview on that, actually. Oh, I understand why. The track's off. Okay, fair enough. So if we're back over here, that's why, because I was on the house beat. Sorry, my mistake. So here, let's just try that again. Sorry, because I was on the wrong beat. Turn off the house. We'll start again just so you can hear A. That was the one that's had all the work gone into it to make it a good drum beat, in my opinion. Perhaps not somebody else's, but it has vibe, it has groove, it has timing differences, it has velocity applied to it. C, on the other hand, as I said, is often where we begin when we don't know all those things and we think, great, we've executed a pretty cool beat in terms of the sounds we've used and the drum kit we've got, but everything is robot, computer, perfect. And it sounds okay, but like I said, if you start getting used to listening carefully, a pro drum beat is going to sound like A. And for me, it's always about something that starts to getting me moving. And B, like I said, we don't have to have B, but it's in the middle, but actually you can kind of see it there. When I click, you see the notes moving. It's where everything's been snapped to the grid. So A, no quantization, all the dynamics. B, quantization. C, quantization and no dynamics, right? So there's three comparisons there. So in a second, we can come back and look at how we fix that, right, in those clips. But B, the 808 is the house groove with the same thing going on. So again, A is our more vibey pattern, which has, again, velocity, dynamics, some timing changes, makes it more interesting. C, again, is our friend that has been quantized and no dynamics. So again, let's do a quick comparison between those two. A, and then over to C. Right, and then with our techno beat, exactly the same thing over here. Another drum kit, same thing going on. A has all the good special sauce in it, and C does not, unprogrammed, right? So what we want to avoid is all the C's in our drum program as a starting point. Doesn't matter which genre we're working in, we kind of want that. Not that. So we want drums that sound more natural. We want drums that sound not mechanical. We want to work with velocity and we want to do humanization, right? Humanization, does anyone, again, if you wish to answer that in the chat, I'm not sure if there's many of you currently in the stream that fancy kind of interacting, but if you do and you want to treat it like a classroom, then you can jump in and let me know again what you feel humanize is. We know velocity is dynamics. What is humanizing then, perhaps, if we use that term? So any of these kits here, we can grab them and we can start making our own pattern. So let's do that in a second. Let's look at, I'm just going to check here what I'm going to go through. Yeah, okay, so we've got plenty to work our way through. What we could do in a second is do swing and groove and syncopation perhaps before we sort of start looking at some of these things here. But let's maybe just go straight to the 808 call kits, pop in a new clip here, and we're working with the same drum kit over here. And let's look at something like just the hi-hat in this kit. Just going to catch myself out again there. Okay, perfect. So now we look at the closed hi-hat. Okay, so if we're over here and we're programming our closed hi-hat today and we make it 16th notes, so we draw all the way across here, we can have that closed hi-hat in our drum rack, drum kit, and we can have a buddy to it. Okay, and in this one, Ableton Live 12 and 11, 12 more so. 11 gives us the same option, and that is to randomize the velocity of these notes that I've programmed in here. So that looks different because this is 12, but you can do the same thing. You can go and randomize these closed hi-hats. So the first thing we can do is have in this group of 16th closed hi-hats, we can go down to our randomization. And back in the day, before we had 11 and 12, so if you're on 10 or 9, we often used to just make our own little loop here. So you might loop up the very first few hats and just come up with your own kind of manual groove. And you can come up with hundreds of different possibilities here, right? And this can be, if we were doing shakers, that would be very, very important as well to get it to sound like it was again being played by a person. So we used to do that back in the day, and we might copy that right across our track like so, or we might sort of make the next 4 hi-hats a bit different. So that was something we used to do some time back, but now we've got kind of some pretty good possibilities where we can come back to this hi-hats here that are firing away, hit randomize down the bottom, and then you can adjust this little box next door. And so I quite like doing that, and then I just bring my value right up to something quite small. I don't want it too crazy, obviously that might be a feeling you're going for. Otherwise, you might just want it more subtle. So again, if we're doing a shootout and we compare that clip to our blue clip, it's the same as the whole kit, A and C. This one is just like a machine gun firing out a closed hi-hat. There's no viable soul whatsoever. So I noticed no one popped up with the humanize in the answer or in the comments, so let's break it down. So we know velocity is dynamics. Humanization, since 12, we have a tool for that. So again, much like I've done here, let's do another example down. If we were programming our beat, we've got our closed hi-hats like this. Again, back in the day, we might have similarly, so let's undo all these velocities. Make them all the same again. So we might have done our sort of looping of the first 4 notes, and we might have done our manual velocity because we were doing it that way, and then we might have gone in here and we might have changed a little bit the note lengths around, and then we might have come in here further and manually nudged a bit of our timing. And again, we're having what we have looked at already since we started today: quantization, timing, little nuances of a human being involved. And a human is not going to play their hi-hat every single time bang on that grid. You have to have either recording quantize on or ways to force it onto that grid, right? So if we're programming these beats on our computer, these are things we want to think about. So now on that particular clip, we've humanized it. So it's not only got velocity, it's got little note length differences, but more important than the note length, all the note lengths could be the same. It's about those little changes in timing where things are a little bit ahead of the beat and a little bit behind. So again, manually, you could do all that work there, and that works, right? And then you could copy that across, or you could do differences as you go over here. But again, Ableton's kind of developed itself into a powerful tool. Well, it always was, but it's got more and more powerful. So in our purple clip back here, we can also select all of those hi-hats there. Then we can come over here and you can see straight away that we now have in 12 since a while in the MIDI tools or into our toolkit, Humanize, with a 10% figure here, which can be adjusted. And so let's say that we actually make it super, we're going to do it in real time, right? So if I drag that up and down, you'll see what it's doing, right? So it's moved all the timing of all those notes, 100% extreme. So I'm doing that so you can see, you can actually adjust this in real time, which is pretty cool. So if I put it back to 10%, it's not actually doing anything until I, like if it's just showing like it was before I started clicking and dragging. There was no difference, by the way, I must point that out. If you wanted to commit that 10%, you would hit humanize. That would commit that movement, or you'd click in there and start dragging. So clicking and dragging in there, or selecting a number in here and hitting humanize, that's going to commit that movement. If you just open up the clip like we had it, there was nothing applied, right? So I do want to point that out. So right now we're back to, let's get it back to 0. So everything's on the grid like so. So right now we still see 10% humanize here, but it's not doing anything. But if we zoom in, here's our grid, here's our hi-hats, and we click it, we'll see just a very, very small amount of movement, and it's now no longer snapping to that grid. So that was 10% humanization. Let's undo that. Let's get all the notes right back to just snap to the grid, like so. Because what you can do, as I said, very, very cool, is hit play, and then you could click in here and decide, again, how much of that you would like, right? And if we put a kick drum in, just for context, we've now got a tight kick drum and we've got a humanized hi-hat. And if we undo it, put it back, so let's just zoom in and check. I think we're back. Let's put our kick drum in. Now let's go to the closed hi-hats and let's click and drag around a bit. So you can kind of hear how tight that is. And if you did do 100%, it's not going to really work with that current kick drum pattern because it's very, very loose, right? So again, depending on the genre of music you're writing, if you're writing organic house or something that you want a very, very human feel, you would be using higher values of this to encourage it to feel that way. And if you're writing more electronic genres and they're perhaps a little bit closer to being quantized, then you would be lower values here, but still a little bit of that goes a long, long way, right? And again, all of that can happen in the same way by playing that stuff in. So, you know, if you're over here with the MIDI clip and you're on your push and you're going to play that for a bit, which is another way to do it, right? So you can kind of, we can delete that clip and we can turn on record and we could jam away a little bit. That's not so easy to do with all the streaming that's going on from backwards and forwards. But again, if you're playing that in, I didn't have a metronome, I didn't have a kick, but there's all my lovely hi-hats that have all the velocity and note length differences to them, and then you can work with them. So if I was even just to look at these two, let's see if I've got a couple that are really useful here. Yeah, I think just these two here kind of could easily be made to kind of work already as a hi-hat pattern here. And you could literally sort of say, well, you know, they're not quite in the grid where they need to be. So you could manually drag them around, or that's the thing that you can do if you play them in and then access later. You can go and select the notes as a group or individually, go to the quantize tab over here and decide how you want to quantize it. I don't want the grid because the grid is 1/64th notes. I'm going to change that to say 16th notes, right? And this hi-hat here, it's probably going to nudge it closer to here, but you can again say start of the note, so the front of it. So I want that front of the note to go to the nearest 16th or the grid, whichever way, and then I can kind of like, you know, select it and move it like it did move to that particular note because that was the closest one. And then if I grab this one, it will do the same thing with the start of the note. And you can again do that in real time. So as you can see, you can nudge it around. In the end, both those notes need to come across a little bit, but there they all, that one there and this one here. But all of that can be done, and as I said, if you're not like me, live streaming with a controller and OBS and YouTube and everything, you can practice that. You'll get it a lot closer to the grid, and then you can use Quantize Post to dial in what things need correction and what don't. And again, you don't have to choose 100%. So you might want that particular note there just a little bit closer to the line, but not tight on the line. It's because I've already quantized it that it's going to remain there. But if I undo that, put things back a bit, go back a little bit, and we do quantize this, and we're going to this line here, or a 16th or something, the percentage is how close it's going to snap to that line. So again, you can not over quantize. Remember that being a bad thing. Often I'm using percentages here like 70s, 80s, 90s, just to get it nearer the line, but not actually snapped on the line. So if anyone's not following that well, or has any questions, do pop it in the chat and I'll answer those as we go. We are here in Ableton Live doing a live stream about rhythm and groove, getting pro rhythms and grooves. That's the idea here. Just going to check something for a quick second. Okay. All right, so let's jump out of there. But so I'd really highly recommend, like I said, playing stuff in, having a MIDI controller, getting to grips with that, because you're getting all of that stuff that we were just doing a second ago with those hi-hats. It's all happening naturally. It's all happening here naturally. And I could have gone on recording those hi-hats for 5 minutes, and then I can come back, find my favorite grouping, loop that up. That could be my hi-hat pattern, and there we go. And then we build around that, right? You just need a metronome or kick drum, and you can start playing in all your sounds. But we're going to program it so you can also see how that works. But yeah, that's really, really important. So let's come back over here. So hopefully now we kind of see that it's easy to do robot and machine in Ableton Live and in a computer, and especially if you program with a mouse. We've got some great tools in 12, and 11 had the velocity, didn't have the humanize, but we can make our patterns come to life. They can become more human sounding with those great tools that we have. So that's all of those things up there. We're then going to look at, maybe we'll do swing as a good choice next. So let's say that we pick on the C clip of the house groove. So let's make sure it's switched on. It is, okay. So this is my drum groove of the 808. Sounds okay, but nothing has been humanized and nothing has velocity. Everything's bang on the grid, right? It's bang on the grid and there's nothing in terms of dynamics. So let's grab our closed hi-hat and let's pop over here and let's turn it into a bit of a, we want to, sorry, it should be down here. We want to randomize that to turn that into something a little bit more. Before I do that, I'm going to copy it down one more. Let's make that another color. Okay, so we're up on this one. So my closed hi-hat, I'm going to randomize that. And actually, just before I do that, I'm going to make another copy, because it's all about shootouts today a bit, so we can hopefully hear what's going on. So we're going to randomize those closed hi-hats. They now have a bit of vibe. Again, we could humanize those a bit, perhaps 10% is quite nice. Let's have a listen in a second, because we can, I love that we can do it in real time. Like I said, we can click in there in real time, so you can kind of hear what's going on with that. Let's have the tom drums a little bit randomized. Let's have the maracas randomized. Let's have the hand clap a little bit randomized. Let's go a little bit less on the hand clap, so it's a bit tighter. It doesn't, sorry, the other way. So it just has only just a little bit softer, harder each note. Again, you could do all this by hand if you want, but you know, it's actually going to sound pretty good like this. Again, I'll do the snares, but with a little bit. The unique one I'm not going to touch is the bass drum. I'm going to leave that with full velocity. Let's check in A, up here, the kick. It was probably, we can hover over the notes and hit command here just to see the values. As you can see there, in the best version of this drum kit already, all those kicks were originally the same velocity, and that's okay. If you want your kicks, also the claps and snares, I'm just checking there, they were pretty much the same as well. Oh, hang on, am I looking at the right clip? Let me just check. Yes, I was. That's good. So you can see where the main velocity changes were in some of the other sounds, right? The maracas had really low velocity, and the other hi-hats and things, they are definitely with the different velocities, so they're having a conversation and things with each other. So coming back to this one we're working on here, so we've got kind of like quite a bit of randomization now, even more there, but I've left the kick alone. So what does it sound like? A lot more vibey. Let's get our closed hi-hat. Let's play around with that humanize a bit. Just a little bit. If we go crazy, too loose for me, so I'm going to go back. I went back a bit too far actually. One step right back to there. Okay, now we're good. So a little bit on the hi-hat until you feel it starting to get too loose. Somewhere in there is nice. Might try a bit on my hand claps. So it's just got a more nicer kind of looser organic feeling, right? So you can pick and choose in there what you're humanizing, what you're kind of adjusting. But the dynamics made a huge difference here. I left the kick alone. Alex Moreno, following you are making it very clear. Thank you. Oh, that's great to hear, because as I said, I did want to try and make today beginner friendly, so it's not, we've not gone off on too technical a journey at this point in time. So yeah, hopefully you can see here that everything I've done there with what was a very stiff clip has turned that now back into something more interesting. Like I said, it's really up to you. You don't have to use these tools. You can do it all manually as well and turn down each sound and move them manually around. That's really entirely up to you, but you should do it one way or another. So we could move our snares one ahead of the beat and one a little bit late if we want, right? So, you know, you can do that if you like. You can manually kind of move things around. So we made a couple of copies there. So let's do a shootout. The new C. Versus the old C. And don't be tricked by loudness, because that's generally when I'm working with people, and I understand because I started in the same position as everybody here, we often feel like this sounds the best. This C clip, but that's only really because everything's maximum velocity, or it's not max velocity, but everything is the same velocity and perfect. And it's sort of the loudness that tricks you into thinking that it's better because everything's hitting at the same hardness, but we don't drum like that. And so if we go to A, things like that particular sound down there, that maraca is very, very soft. You know, if I pull that up, you barely hear it, right? But it's in there. So that's what makes that A clip very, very different, very unique and more vibey. It's the best way to describe it. Okay, so let's now look at something else, and that is what's called swing, right? So let's start with another point here, which is swing. So if we open up the C clip and we remember that that C clip is a copy of without any timing change and without any velocity. So we've programmed in a beat, but we've not considered dynamics, and we've not considered any little nuances that suggest that there's a little bit of late playing, a little bit of early playing. It's all perfect, perfect dynamics, perfect timing. So we could go and reach for a swing and say, okay, let's change this particular groove by going for a swing. Now, what I quite like is that Ableton's language about that section of the workflow, they call it the groove pool. And so when we go to the groove pool, and actually you can do it quite nicely here just with the hot swap, that'll take you straight to the groove pool and open it up. And these are all the different grooves that we have access to, and there's lots here, and there's all sorts of quirky ones and ones that are not a copy, but a replica of drum machines that have those beautiful swings attached. Dr. Bones, very good afternoon to you. Good to see you in the stream here. So there's all sorts of swing here. And grooves. So I like that Ableton label it the groove pool, because what we'll learn in a little bit is that some of these are not just purely swing, they're a little bit more than just swing. And so remind me if I don't, someone in the chat, to break that down in a second as to what I'm talking about. So just keep in mind, Ableton call it the groove pool. There's a good reason for that, because it's not called the swing pool, right? So not everything in here is just purely swing. So let's look at what swing is first up. So let's go back again to, doesn't matter which track, we'll go back to our 808 if we like. That's the one that's switched on. We'll put in a new MIDI clip, and we're just going to, again, grab ourselves the closed hi-hat, this one over here, and we're going to put in 2 closed hi-hats on 2/16, just like that. We're going to loop that up, okay? And when we're talking about swing, so if we push play on this, we get that, right? When we talk about swinging notes, what's really interesting about swing, and where a lot of people get confused, is the swinging is the even beats, not the odd beats. So this would be an odd beat as it lands on the 1, and this lands on the 2, that would be an even beat. And if I put another 16th alongside, this would be an odd beat. And if I put another 16th, I'd have another even. So this beat here and this beat here, they are the even beats, and they're the beats that are going to be swung. So when we're talking about swing, we're talking about swinging even beats. And I think if you're starting with swing, a great place to start understanding swing and using it and learning it is to come over here and look for the swings that have 16th in them. So if you look down here, you'll start to see some of these swings lower down. They have 8th swing and 16th swing and 30 seconds even. I'd suggest very strongly to begin by learning with 16th swing. As that is probably the easiest, and I probably use that the most. I sometimes might use an 8th note swing, and then some of the grooves in here I can use all the time. But again, if you're learning swing, perhaps start with the 16th swings. And if we just pick on one category here, so this is the Logic swings, actually from Apple Logic, because they're rather famous. So here we actually have access to all of the swings that are available in the Logic DAW of Apple. And we have, if you notice here, Swing Logic 16ths 51. So it has a number after it, the 16ths. And then we go from 51 to 74, right? And if we click on that, we get a preview. And I'm going to go from extremes. I'm going to jump from 51, which we're hearing at the moment. If it's a bit quiet, I'll just turn up the preview a little bit. And now let's jump to 74. So again, if someone wants to let me know in the chat, what is the number significance and what is the difference between 51 and 74? Is 51 more swinging more than 74, or is it the other way around? And of course, if you look at the Logic swings, we've got a huge range between there. I mean, 51 to 74, that's what, using my maths, 23 different choices of amounts of swing. And if you go further down, we've got more Logic. You get some quirky sort of types as well. You've got these sub down, sub up. You've also got the MPC drum machine, again, like the Logic ones we have enabled, and access to the MPC 3000 16ths. Amazing. Again, I'd just suggest sticking to 16ths so you get an understanding of it. That's a good place to learn. You've got double up, double down, funkers you can try. The Notator's another drum machine, really nice. They don't have numbers, they have B, C, D, E, and F, but if you listen and compare that range. And then we've got down here the SP1200, another very, very famous drum machine. Okay, so hopefully you can hear. I noticed no one popped it up in the chat, but that's okay. So let's come back to the Logic swing, 51 to 74. That's 23 choices we've got. 51 is very, very close to straight. Okay, thinking 50 is straight, 51 is just off straight, and 74 is very, very swung. Okay, so the number at the end here is telling us the percentage of swing of those even beats away from the grid, the timing. They are going to be swung really late, sounds like galloping horses, or really tight, just a subtle amount of movement. So if we come back to those two hi-hats that I drew in a second ago, if I grab the even one here and I start moving the start of it, that is swinging that hi-hat, the even hi-hat, away from the grid. So we could manually create our own swing here in this area here. We're making the even beat swung later than the grid. And let's have a listen. So if we're kind of somewhere there, we're in our 50s in the logic swing, and if we're somewhere over here, we're probably in our 70s, right? So let's start there. Let's turn our tempo down a bit. There we go. So a tiny bit of swing, like 51 would be just off. If you zoom in here, we're just a little bit later. But it makes a little bit of difference. That's already got a little vibe for my ear. And the further we go, sorry, a bit too crazy there. The more we're getting somewhere into the 74 territory, right? And if you're doing, depending on the genre you're making, if you're doing something like hip hop, you know, or garage or drum and bass, some different genres, some of them, swing is super important to those genres, like Jay Dilla. Hopefully some of you are familiar with his work as a hip hop producer. You'll even see people on the internet talking about the some magic swing number. It was 64% for the Dilla swing and things like that, where people have their own personal kind of more or less percentage that they used to use. You know, the Dilla swing is this number, and people try and figure it out and get really into it, you know. So do we use swing on every single genre and every single track we make in Ableton Live? Not necessarily. Again, it could be genre dependent, it could be it's up to you. Okay, so manually looking at the swing, I've been showing you here that you can do it manually just so you can visually kind of get a feel for what's going on. So let's say now we put this beat back on the grid, nudged up against its neighbor, and what we do is we use now the swing that comes with Ableton over here. So essentially what we can do is go and open up the groove pool. So let's go up to the top of the browser, open up the groove pool like this. Let's get rid of this one that's already in there because I was doing something in the past where that's been something I chose. Delete that, and let's put in a 51, and then we might grab something more swung, maybe not as crazy as 74, maybe a 59's nice, and pop that in here. So I've got different choices. I've got two now, right? And if we look down on our envelope down the bottom here, we can see that the groove is showing none. So right now my two hi-hats have no swing. I'll just make sure, as I said, I did put them back properly. I did. So there's no swing. And then we can start by choosing one or either of those. You can definitely hear the 59. Again, the 51, pretty close to straight, we know that. So what we want to be a bit careful about, and people all generally ask this question a lot, this is a preview. So again, in real time, we're able to switch between different grooves in the groove pool, listen to what they're doing. But effectively, if you leave it like that, it's applied, but it's not changed the note position or amount or anything like that. It's not what we call committed to these notes. It's applied and we hear it, but it's not physically moved the notes, okay? So you might want to watch out for that, because if we loop this back out to a bar, and let's put in all our 16ths all the way across. A bit crazy there. No, that's white. Let's bring that in, get rid of those. Okay, so we've got our 16th hi-hat pattern closed, okay? We've got some swings in here. So currently we've got the 59 chosen, and we hear the 59. But it's not applied. So if you came along and decided that was the swing you wanted to use, you can apply it. That's going to fix it to that clip, and you will see the change. So if we zoom in a bit, we're going to see this note get longer and the other note probably get shorter. So let's watch what happens. And there we go, right? So again, you can see all the even beats are the ones that have been affected by the swing. And when you commit it in Ableton, it's doing the same thing as I was doing before. It just does it a little bit of a different way. It lengthens the first note to push that distance of 59 or 74 away. So it's still shortening the second note, but it lengthens the first note to do it. But that swing is now committed here. Okay, but something else, I'm going to undo that. Let's go back, because this is a great example of what I wanted to speak about a bit earlier. So I have remembered to say, why Ableton calls this the groove pull for me and not the swing pull is because if we look kind of carefully, this swing logic 16th 59, it doesn't only change the timing. So if we look along the groove when we drop it in here, we can actually, again, in real time, mess around with it and really change it. But what is key is at the end here, the very, very end, it's not only going to adjust the timing and swinging it, it's also adding velocity. And some of these grooves, let's start referring to it as that, even though it's got swing in the name, then they're not going to have any velocity change. So if I maybe bring in a notator swing, 0 velocity, right? So that would only be swinging those notes. There's going to be no velocity applied. But the Logic 59, well, that actually applies velocity, and so does the 51. Okay, 20%. And again, you can mess around with that. You could make it more. But watch what happens then if we recommit it again. So again, we've got it here. We've selected it. We're applying it. We can hear the change. It's not committed though, but we say, okay, let's commit it. Down here, there's our 20% velocity. So really keep an eye out for that, because that is why I believe it's a groove pull, because grooves have swing and velocity as a part of the combination. Okay, we're not going to do again a masterclass on this groove pull, but there's a lot to like about it, and the fact that we can do again in real time all sorts of messing around. The one thing I would say that I really like since 12 and more recent times is this little yellow box over here. What I love about that is back in 11 days and I think earlier, if you started to have a swing selected here in your clips, if you opened up a brand new MIDI clip, that isn't like if we duplicated this hi-hat. So if we're over here and we duplicate it, it's going to look the same. It's going to have the same selection in here. But if we opened up a brand new track with a brand new MIDI clip on it, back in the previous versions, and we clicked in here, it wouldn't have that showing in there. You would have to have gone in and remembered, I've got a groove or a swing going on. I need to add that in here. But what now happens that's really, really nice is that tiny little yellow box. And if it's on, so if we put it on the 59, that means every time I open a new MIDI clip now, that will be automatically the swing that's showing in that box. So less confusion about getting lost as to where swing is, where is it, or groove, where is it and where isn't it. So that is a very, very useful small little thing to keep an eye on, and you can switch between whatever it is that you want to use across your project. Give it the little yellow icon, and that means every new MIDI clip, bass line, chords, whatever you're doing, vocals, it's going to have that swing popping up in the MIDI clip as the choice here. So for example, if we remove 59, we only have one, and we do another track with another MIDI clip, it doesn't show none, right? It could have shown none, but it shows automatically what was up here and selected. So again, if we deselect that yellow, it should do it in reverse. So let's deselect that, start a new MIDI clip, open it up. It now says none, right? We'd have to go in and pick it from that list. That's how things used to work. Love that feature. So it helps not getting lost. So hopefully swing, everyone got that? Everyone got what swing is, or swing and groove? So I've listed down here below it, heavy swing, garage, J Dilla, hip hop, like I said, famous for the J Dilla swing, minimal swing. So just to give you an idea, again, like I said, you don't have to apply it to everything, okay? It's a choice. Sometimes those MPC 3000 and the SP 1200, if you want a classic drum machine feel with a swing, maybe in your house track, in your garage track, in your hip hop, then you might go for a swing because you want that feeling, but you don't have to use it on every drum groove. It doesn't make every drum kit, drum rack, drum groove better. Not at all. It gives it a feeling. It's giving it a vibe and a feeling, and it's specific to some genres and other genres not. Okay, but creativity has no boundaries. You can use it wherever you want, but I've just listed here a bit. Heavy, garage, J Dilla, so Dilla referring to hip hop, minimal swing, minimal house, minimal genres, techno, trance, tech house. Okay, we'll come on to syncopation in a moment. So yeah, swing and groove, hopefully locked in on that one now. Let's do it as we've got a garage kit up here. Let's go to C on the garage kit, this one here. And because garage has a heavy amount of swing normally, this C clip is where I've taken out all the velocity and I've taken out all of the timing differences. So it's straight and no dynamics. Let's get it faster. And let's improve this, because this would be a drum groove that would improve by having a swing perhaps, thinking that garage is heavily swung. So let's maybe get something like, we could go on the MPC, really nice famous drum machine. Let's delete the logic out of here. Let's go MPC and let's go something pretty heavy, 64 MPC. Maybe 68, and maybe let's have a less swung as well, right? Doesn't really matter what order they're in. And now we can go into C, and we've got none, but now we can kind of preview all those in real time, right? So let's do a shootout. So C, no swing at all. Let's add first the least amount of swing, closest to the grid, which is 54. 64. Right, straight away my head starts bobbing. I don't know if you guys and girls feel that. I hope you do. So even 68, it's working good. Let's see if we can push it too far. Can we get too much swing on this garage pattern? So if we go for, say, a really high amount of swing, the 74, let's have that as an option. Still working. Right, so if we wanted that whole drum kit, all of this pattern here swung, and let's have a look, has 74 got velocity? No, right, so it hasn't, but let's say I just add a little bit of velocity, right? Maybe say 10% in there, and then I commit that, right? Just an example, so let's copy our C down, give it a new color. We'll go into the white one down here and we'll commit it. Again, velocity, we don't have to. Let's just say we do the swing first, because if I do the velocity, it's going to apply that to everything, by the way. It's going to apply to everything. 54 feels like it's pulled down, kind of like it. Yeah, well, they're all playable. It is subtle, but I'm glad you hear it, Dr. Bones, because it is a subtle thing we're looking at today. But I think if you do this in your own time, in your own workflow, you'll notice a massive, massive difference. Because yeah, I think over the internet like this, it's not as easy perhaps to hear it, but you can trust me, it's 100% making a big difference. But I have an ear for picking this out, and yeah, you know, that can come with perhaps a lot of time listening to these subtle kind of things that go on. So I'm going to pick 74 in this white clip. I believe I zeroed out the velocity for now. No, I didn't. I'm going to do that just so we just apply the swing and we go commit. And you can see it changed that pattern quite a lot. Let's do Command Z, watch all the notes. That's a lot, right? So even if you don't hear it, now you're seeing it. That's what it's doing. So if you're looking at this whole clip here and you're committing it, it's a lot, right? So yeah, it's making a big difference. So it's swinging all those notes, and now do need the velocity in this clip though as well to make it extra nice. So if we go back and we do it one more time and we do a bit of velocity. The only thing is, again, I don't want to make it too technical and advanced, but I am swinging the kick, I'm swinging everything, and I would be changing the velocity of everything. So if I want to do it separately to only some items, like just the hi-hat swung and the velocity of that, I would do this a different way. I hope that makes sense. So as always, there are many options with this. I'll just do 10% velocity, and now we'll commit it. So you can see down here, it was subtle, didn't do too much. Very subtle. Let's even make it a bit extreme so we can kind of see it. But it, you know, I would take the kick out of this rack if I want to do that. So I might go over here to the garage kit and I might say, I don't want the kick involved in the swing or in the velocity. So I remove it from the drum kit, put it over here, call this the kick, right? And now the kick of the garage kit is hanging out by itself, but it's not going to be affected by what I do now over here. So that's a bit more advanced, but there's plenty of ways to manage that. So now we're going to go for a bigger value. Let's go say 35%. So we're adding swing and velocity to everything else: tambourines, closed hi-hats, the snare, all of that good stuff. Commit it. So now we've got a bit more. Still wasn't huge, but it has applied it. I guess we could go for more extreme down here, but let's have a listen. So I've kept my kick straight and not changed the velocity. And over here, we've got our swung other parts. Let's go one more time just to see what happens. Let's go a lot more velocity then. Let's go mad. Let's go all the way in and say, make sure we've got the right one here. Okay, well, it's still kind of more subtle than I expected in there, but yeah, interesting. So maybe with the velocity, I would sort of perhaps do that, I think, manually rather than like that. Would be my choice anyway, to go through and do it all individually. But there you go. So making a difference is the swing is the most important thing here. Whether you use the velocity on this, as I said, I think I would personally do that individually like I was doing earlier, but it can be part of the groove, as you saw on the hi-hats here where I added it before, my two hi-hats, wherever they've gone, somewhere in there. All right, so let's get back on track a bit here, because we've still got a bit to go, quite a bit as usual. So I'm going to undo my way back till the kick appears in that rack actually. So let's get back to the kick in the rack so I can replay those if I wish, everything together. But that was just to show you that you could manage that a different way. So swing, we've got ourselves to. Not sure what happened there, Dr. Bones, if you wanted to let me know something, but yeah. So let's come back now to a few other things. So we've had all these kits and we've been shooting things out. I'm going to go old shootout amongst stuff. Just going to get myself back around to where I know where I am. Okay, so we've focused on the don'ts today. Too much quantization, what we can learn from real drum breaks. We looked at that early on, so if you join into this video later, do go back and check that, because that teaches us a lot about what actually too much quantization is and how we can do perfection in Ableton Live and computers easy, but that's not what actual good grooves are all about. So humanizing, natural sounding, velocity. So let's look at some of the other things we can do in order to make a drum beat more interesting, right? So something we looked at earlier, very early at the start of the video, in terms of the terms of rhythm, was offbeats. Now those offbeats are those beats that are in between the strong beats, okay? So let's have a look at that. So if we start building up a bit of a drum groove here, let's have a look at offbeats in particular. So let's go into our house kit, pop over here, and we might see if we can use something we've already got a bit of. Yeah, so that purple one is still the kind of perfect example. I'll check back here, the green one is 2. Okay, well, let's do it from scratch. I think it's even better, so you can kind of see. So let's pop in here. We'll go into 1 bar. We'll open it up to 2 bars. And let's pop in a kick drum here. We'll just have 1 bar of kicks like that for a second. So we're dealing currently in 16th notes, okay? So we're kind of following the kick drum on all of our strong beats. So we've got a 1 bar measure with our strong beats accented with our kick drum, which follows our 4/4 time signature, all those basic things that we kind of looked at it earlier. And what we've got here is 3 other 16ths, right? That we're currently are not being occupied with any particular beat. Those are our weak beats or our off beats right in between those kicks here. And if we sort of play around with putting a sound on those different beats, let's just do 1 sound, because then what we can do is actually move it around, right? So let's get rid of all those and we'll have it in this position for a second. And let's say we just do a loop again, smaller loop. So in 16th notes, we've got 3 16ths we can play around with here, right? That leads into when we use these off beats and weak beats in between, and we're divided up by 16ths, so it's 3 16ths. If we, why I keep saying that is if we were to change the grid, then we'd have, you know, more 30-second notes to put in between the 2 strong beats. And if we go the other direction, so if we're making ourselves bigger, then we're just going to fit 2 1/8 notes in there. Oops, I went to triplet grid, sorry. We're just going to get 1/8 note in that space over here, right? So we would have 1/8 note syncopating in that area. And if we had quarter notes, we wouldn't be able to fill in the space in between because we would be all over the top of our beats, right? So sorry, 1 more to get to quarters there. So we'd have that. So we're not really looking at weak beats and off beats with a quarter because we've got overlapping, but with 1/8 notes and 16ths and then shorter, smaller 32nd, 64ths, we're able to highlight those weak and off beats. But I think we just, again, we're learning today, we keep it to 16ths. We can see we've got 3 to play with, okay, in 16ths. That leads me to syncopation. And I really like syncopation in my music. It's where a lot of the conversation happens between different parts, a bass with a kick, you know, different hi-hats talking to each other, lots of these different beats and different beat divisions all having a conversation with each other with syncopation. So syncopation is actually using those weak beats and off beats, programming silence sometimes. Don't forget, again, silence is good. No notes, but also notes in there. And I'll just read you from a description here because hopefully that will help. I'll do a little bit of reading because syncopation and swing, they get confused a lot. And so let's maybe just try and break it down a little bit so that it isn't as confusing. So I wrote some notes earlier. Syncopation: to stray from a predictable or normal rhythm by either omitting, so no beat, the strong beat, so you'd be omitting one of those, that's one way to create syncopation, or accenting or stressing the weak beat, which is what we've just been doing a second ago. A rhythm is said to be syncopated when off beats are emphasized. So if we have beats on those off beats in between our strong 4 beats, we're in 4/4, they are giving us that syncopation. Syncopation means accenting surprising beats within the bar, so you can move around between all those weak and off beats. Okay, so this is important. Syncopation can be applied to anything: vocals, guitars, drums, synth, brass, bass, etc. The definition of syncopation varies from that of swing. People mix the 2 concepts up because musicians who use one will frequently use the other. And that's where it gets confusing, because you might have swing and you might have syncopation, but they are different animals, they're different beasts. And I've really highlighted this thing that I wrote here. Swing describes the shifting of offbeats by varying amounts, which we just looked at, whereas syncopation describes accentuating them in some way, but not necessarily affecting the timing. So hopefully that doesn't confuse you, but I think it's good to understand that. And further on, a bit more technical, there are a number of ways in which syncopation can be added to a rhythm. It can be done with velocity, volume, timbre, so tone, interaction between different instruments. Remember conversation, I think syncopation's amazing for that, or by leaving gaps in the melody or rhythm for emphasis. So we're definitely going to explore syncopation. I'm sure when we get to harmonic rhythm and melodic rhythm, we'll be digging into that also. But right at the bottom, when combined, especially with swing, the impact on the groove of the track can be huge. That's the last bit on syncopation. So if we go to all of our existing drum beats and grooves we've been using today, all of the examples, and we look at this, and we look at these kits, let's maybe concentrate for a second on the house one actually, staying over here. We can see that in this example, all of the strong beats are identified following our metronome pulse. And then this snare here, this would fall on an offbeat. It's a syncopated snare. These snares here are falling on a strong beat, and they're actually called the backbeat. They're on the even, which I spoke about earlier, they're on the even beats in this groove here. Some of the closed hi-hats fall on the strong beats, but there's lots in the offbeat. So the normal thing that you learn a lot with syncopation is your hi-hats, you know, living on the offbeats, particularly this position here. It's a very classic offbeat hi-hat, as it's called, right? But you can see the rest of the drums in this kit, they're basically using syncopation where they're not landing on a strong beat and they're in between. So what I was just doing before with that is just messing around. You could put a rim here where I've added it and it might not sound very good. Kind of sounds perhaps a bit strange there. Whereas if we move it here or there, it feels late. There it feels a bit early. There it feels kind of pretty comfortable. But if we started to add that with something else, so they're having a bit of a conversation, it starts to make a bit more sense, right? So if that sort of high mid-tom up there also works nicely in conversation with the bass, it's now having conversation with the rim. Different conversation, bit of a weird one, but maybe, right? So I love syncopation because it's kind of this way in so many of these genres we're working with where if we program everything I've got here now over in this second bar, and we have it, remember earlier, if you weren't in the stream then, in the don'ts, we've got don't do for good rhythm and groove, too much on beat, too many quarters or eighths. So if we divide up our 1 bar measure in lots of quarters and eighths, of course we don't have so much silence to play with, and we don't have so many of these subdivisions like 32nds, 64ths, 16ths. I think if you start with 16ths, you give yourself a lot more space to program with. So we don't want too much on beat or all elements playing the same pattern. So if we come back to this and we're over in here and our tom is landing on the kick and another one landing on the kick, and so are the rim shots, right, like that, and we loop that out, that's not going to sound very interesting because there's no syncopation there, there's no conversation, everything's landing on beat. And again, when we're starting out, this is unfortunately a common thing we might do a lot of, which is ending up with many things on the strong beat, where we've already got that pretty clearly defined with the kick. And so if we play with our space between those, we could actually get a much more interesting conversation going. And if we do the quarter eighth notes thing, so even if we come over, so let's say we undo that and we copy this pattern over a bit, which is a more interesting pattern, but we turn this one into 2/16, so it's an eighth note, then it kind of overlaps that. That might be something you want, but you're going to start getting, you know, and again, this might be like that. And this, if it was a quarter note, it would be like that. And that's not going to sound, again, as vibey as this pattern over here, right? It's doing the same thing, but it's not. Right, so we want to use all these lovely divisions, and if we kind of, you know, like had some swing or humanize on this plus velocity, it's going to sound a lot more interesting. This is kind of giving us, you know, a lot of overlap and a lot of kind of virtual sort of mud we're heading into there. So syncopation, really, really vital in my music, and I think most. And I've got another couple little notes here between the main beats. That's what we're looking at now. Drum and bass, Afro house. If you're writing either of those genres, I mean, I'm not specially living in either of those genres, but syncopation is hugely important to my music, as I'm imagining it will be to you as well. So don't. That's a massive one that's going to turn your beats into more pro grooves and rhythms into more professional. And again, remembering we can apply syncopation to all of our different instruments and sounds the same as everything we've looked at today. We've been looking at it in drums. Doesn't have to be just drums. Rhythm is bass, chords, melodies, vocals, you name it, it needs rhythm, right? So all of these things such as where note divisions and timing and dynamics, doesn't matter if it's a vocal or a drum kit. I hope you've got that kind of nice and clear. So back to this groove here, if we look at all of these kits, the techno one as well, again, if we look here, we've got strong beats with a kick. This other little kick is playing syncopating, so that's almost giving us a bass feel on that track, which is really, really nice. So if we played that and we zero out stuff here, doesn't sound that good on its own, right? But there's even a third kick, and that third kick and a fourth kick, that's the conversation, and it's all syncopation. There's a little overlap here and there, but that doesn't matter. They're all kind of having a chat in those spaces. So again, if we bring the grid down smaller, you know, we could see, and I think some of these are almost on a triplet position or with the timing a little bit ahead of the groove. That's a really nice conversation there that makes that whole drum groove kind of work. Hi-hats, typical offbeat position. Right in the middle between the strong beat and the next strong beat is this hi-hat here. And that's fine, it overlaps the kick, but it's a different drum sound. It's a higher frequency sound, it's way up there. So those two can live in the same space, no problem, right? Same with another hi-hat, it plays on the same note. This one plays some on beat and some off. Lovely, gives us our shuffle, right? Then we've got this big long one up here. It's a bit special, it's like a loop, so it kind of does this kind of bit unique. But that whole drum groove, again, it's all coming to life because of that conversation and the syncopated stuff. So if we take away the on beats, so we can do that. Let's do that. We'll just do it in one small loop so we don't have to go all the way across the whole track. So we just do one bar. We take away the on beat stuff. Just make sure that's everything that's on beat removed. This one as well if we like. And now, that's the syncopation, right? And it can sound a bit strange on its own. Sometimes if you're playing around with the hi-hats or conversations and things, the conversation might not sound very good on its own, but when you put it all together, it's the sum of all the parts. So all of these drum kits here, they've got lots of syncopation. So hopefully that's now really clear about what that is and kind of how it's pretty much a very important thing. If I was trying to order some of these things, I would say syncopation to me is more important than swing. Like I said, swing and groove is good to understand what it is, but it's not every single track that you might use that. It's a personal choice, it's a genre decision. So we've got some other stuff up here. We've got accent. Maybe someone could let me know what they think that is, but I'll break it down in a second. Main beats or off beats, we're looking at that down here in syncopation. Layering different subdivisions. That's using the different note lengths, 16ths, 30-seconds, quarters, eighths, dividing up our measure and beats and turning it into an interesting conversation. Dotted notes. So what is a dotted note and how do we make a dotted note? Could be good, could be something good to learn. I like using dotted notes. And so if you're good at fractions and maths, you'll probably eat this up nice and easily. But if we just look at another empty MIDI clip and we put in a 16th note, we know we're in a 16th grid here. This is a 16th note here. What is a dotted note? Let's make our grid one size smaller. So we reveal the 30 seconds. It's whatever the note is that you're wanting to make dotted and another half of another 16th. So in this case, if it's a 16th dotted, it's 1/16 plus a 32nd. Okay, so making dotted notes can be fun because that's going to give you something different to straight 16th notes. That's a 16th dotted. If we undo that and we go to a, let's get a different grid size here. Let's get 8th notes involved. So now if we make it smaller, we're going to have an 8th plus a 16th. That's an 8th dotted. And by the way, if you're going to come across dotted notes everywhere, believe it or not, and you may not have realized yet, but if we're looking at something like a delay, and we bring up over here the standard Ableton delay, let's grab one of those. There we go, put it just here so we can just look at it. If we're looking at this, when we drop that delay on, it's got here a value of 3, okay? Dr. Bones, accent, I guess, is where some notes are more or less strong in relation to the beat, groove, rhythm, maybe. 10 out of 10 there, Dr. Bones. We're going to look at that in a second, but you nailed that absolutely right. Accenting is where we're going to use dynamics, right? Our velocity to kind of accent any particular notes in a particular pattern or groove. And yes, you could say already that the kick drums have accented the strong beats, right? So they've, if we put a kick on all of those 4 strong beats across there, they are accenting the strong beats. They're making it very clear that that's where those beats are in that particular clip there. We're not hearing that though because we're somewhere else, right? Yeah, we're over there. But yeah, that's my delay working now. But yeah, so accenting we can use as well. I'll show you a good little trick for that in a second, but we can accent some of our syncopated beats and stuff as well. So it's a really good one to play around with because it can actually create all sorts of different focus and attention to other parts of your groove. But an example of accenting something already is dropping a kick on all the strong beats, the same as our metronome would give us without the kick pattern, right? So we are accenting all of those strong beats. We'll turn off the delay. Right, that's a form of accenting itself in its most basic. But if we accent other beats in and around, syncopated ones in particular, we can really throw the listener off. Philip Glass does that in Akinama. I need to look up the name of his particular example because you can maybe look that up. I'll just do a quick search for it. Philip Glass, what was the name of his track? It's an Egyptian name. Akhenaten. Maybe I'll drop it in the chat. Let me get that, because for those of you who might be interested in listening to that, where can we find an example of it? I think it's like this. And I'm not sure if he's with a double L, but Philip Glass, Akhenaten. The whole track is to do with, yeah, accenting and shifting of syncopation and accenting. It makes the whole thing come to life in its own way. All right, so I don't get lost over here a little bit. The delay that I dropped there just wanted to show you that that is dealing in dotted notes. So when we drop it onto a track like here and it's in 3, all of these numbers of the left and right of the delay, they're counting 16ths. So if we see 1, it's 1/16. If it's 2, we're adding 2 together. So we could think that is 2/16, right? Which would mean an 8th note. And then 3s are dotted 8ths. And then we get quarters, and then you can keep going. So you're going to come across dotted notes a lot, and I love a dotted 8th delay, which is the 3. So like I said, it's, you know, coming up quite a lot. It's 3/16. So if you're good at maths and fractions, you can simply just keep adding the extra half note onto whatever you want to add to a dotted note. So a dotted 16th plus a 32nd to a 16th, a dotted 8th plus an 8th note plus a 16th, etc. and so on. A dotted quarter note would be a quarter note plus an 8th note, and away you go, right? So the delays are already coming with dotted notes. That will drop in every time with a dotted 8th as a default. Sounds really amazing. We can also see it in the beat repeat, so that would be a good device for grooves and rhythm today, where we can come into here into the grid, and you can start seeing that we don't actually get dotted, unfortunately, in here, but we do get triplets, but that's perhaps for another day. But we don't get dotted there, so we can't do dotted actually as a default in the beat repeat. But I like dotted 8th notes just for a side note there. They sound really good. All right, so let's get back over to bit of a pattern just to wrap up a bit today. So, I've given you a quick rundown on how to make a dotted note. I think that's a good place to start. So if you're trying to make a pattern in the future, try some dotted and straight notes, right? So when you're going through your pattern, maybe with a closed hi-hat like this, we do, or have we got something else we could do it on? We'll just make a new MIDI track over here. Let's just drop a synth on this one for something different for today. I've been doing a lot of that, but let's say we've got a synth over here and we change the grid to, let's say, 8th notes. Okay, so we could have all the way across here that many 8th notes, right? But if we also then divide it back to a 16th note, the grid that is, we could turn some of these into, you know, dotted 8ths, and we could leave perhaps a rest there, actually could be nice, and then another one like so, and now we've got sort of a feel of straight and dotted 8ths on this pattern here. Again, we're in solo somewhere. That's sort of applying a bit of an interesting groove and a rhythm, playing around with straight 8th notes and dotted 8th notes. Just there, just to give you an example of that in action, and that could be applied in different places. So dotted notes are very, very interesting for rhythm and groove. Now you know how to make them. The note, straight note plus half of itself again is going to give you that. So let's make, finally, a little bit of a drum groove here, where we might play around with everything we've seen so far today, plus a bit of accenting, just so you can see what that might do. We can also add some ghost notes, which we haven't used yet. Let's sort of explain what those are, and then we're probably reaching time, about to call time for today. Anything that's left over from today, which there's a bit, can be absolutely added into the next ones in the series. I'm going to do bass, harmony, melody, and then we're going to look at harmonic rhythm and melodic rhythm at the very end of this kind of series, right? We're digging in deep, so anything missed out today, we can carry over to there. So let's get maybe into our house beat. Perhaps we use this kit. Got lots of stuff going on, but let's say we program a beat up from scratch. So we come in here, we've got our mouse in play, and we're going to program a beat in here. It's going to be fairly quick, but we're going to use all these things, right, that we've been looking at so far. So we're going to have our kick drum on all the strong beats. We're going to duplicate that straight away, so we start working in 2 bars, but don't restrict ourselves. Let's get the backbeat emphasized, and let's use one of these classic sort of sounds. So let's maybe have the clap on the backbeat here. And for those, maybe what we'll do is just use either a little bit of Humanize. So we'll pop over here. And let's randomize the velocity a bit on those. So they've already got a little bit of vibe. Let's have a conversation with those with something on the syncopated position. Let's maybe try a rim. Let's copy that over. Similarly, let's get that randomized a bit. Okay, let's maybe have a conversation with a snare or two. That's the rim. Don't like it there. Maybe just have it here. That would be nice right at the end here. So a bit of a end of phrase, end of the 2 bars. We'll bring the velocity down on that note. Instead we might use a percussion one over here. Let's bring those claps down a bit in volume, so we're just going to pop into the rack itself here. We got a big effect on them as well, it seems. Okay, it's a bit better. Let's color our clip so we can see what we're doing as well. Know that we're in a different clip over here. So what I would recommend as well when you're sort of doing this is start trying to, it was trying to be beginner friendly here, but I'm working in 2 bars. I straight away got out of 1 bar because it starts to get me thinking about things that I want to do to sort of signify that, you know, things are going to happen and change. So 4 bars, 8 bars, I might have a fill or a turnaround. So we'll look at that in the future when we look at form and structure. But right here in my 2 bars, if I stayed in 1 bar, I probably wouldn't think too much about little events that kind of just happen on their own towards the end of the bar, right? So it's something to think about, is to get straight into programming your grooves in longer clips. And I'd really recommend like 8 bars or 4 bars minimum, so you start to think about these extra little details right off the bat. So let's get our closed hi-hats in here as well, and we'll do, for the moment, pretty straight pattern across there. Let's have, again, all of those with random velocity, and we'll get more into those so they're more groovy. Okay. It could be interesting to fall sort of on an on beat. Let's have a little bit of a extra clap here, a little fill. And let's make those a bit more interesting with a bit of velocity as well. So those 2 notes there, what we can do quite nicely here is make them into a little ramp. So we're going to ramp the velocity of those up and down a bit. We'll bring it down. Just going to try that hand clap over on the snare for a second. Yeah, I might actually swap these around a bit, so we'll go, just put these out of the way for a second. Yeah, I feel like that's a bit better for what I was looking for. So just building up a bit of a groove here. let's say we add some cymbals in here. So I'm dealing in 16ths at the moment, right? And I kind of like programming in 16ths because it's giving me my clear syncopation targets are quite clear to me about working around the strong beats. Even smaller is also good, but I've already got a clear kind of view of what's going on. If I was in quarters and eighths, I'd sort of be filling up this space quite fast, so I can kind of see that I can add detail and have this conversation going on with each other. And again, if I take out the on-beat stuff, you know, we can hear so you could keep kind of working on that little bit of pattern if you like, you know, and the conversation that's going on there. So some maracas could be nice around the hi-hat. And they could be a bit different to just putting them in the, yeah, something like that little pattern there. Nice little shuffly maracas, and then we can bring that over again. Right, that's feeling quite groovy. Let's get some randomization in there. I'm just drilled into that being part of my workflow. Going to make those quite a bit stronger on there, and I'm going to also make them humanized. Nice. So we'd be balancing our volumes here as we go. So we'd go back into the open hi-hats. So things like these open hi-hats that are actually landing sort of on beat in a few places here, they're an accent, and they're an accent in the sense that they're on beat, they're not off beat, but they're kind of accenting those on beats as well as the, you know, the kick drum. So they're kind of interesting, right? The rest is a lot of syncopation and working around the other sounds. And then the snares are doing the classic backbeat move here. And again, if you didn't want a really strong snare drum like that, perhaps put them on the ream. Let's take the kicks out again. Let's maybe try a little bit more percussion in here now. Well, actually, let's try putting them back. And we'll go the other way. So let's have a little bit of a low conga chat with the kick drum. So let's, maybe sometimes what I do as well is I do go back to my one bar just for a second, just to make a little pattern, and then I might stretch it across. Just could be something as simple as that. So we've got a little conversation now between the kick and those syncopated lower tones. That's why I picked the low tom and the low conga, because they're sort of down in that frequency. I can start building it out like that, right? So let's bring all that back in. And we got something nice and sort of groovy with lots of syncopation going on there, right? In that little bar there. And then again, we can play around with these kind of tones and volume. Yeah, we get another one of these over here a bit. And we got sort of something quite nice and sort of groovy, right? And lots of syncopation going on. And we've used some humanization, and we've used some plenty of dynamics in there in the velocity, and we're sort of accenting different positions again. So if we take out our strong beats again to get a feel, so we remove the on beat type stuff, right? So we have to be a little bit more specific now because I've got some hits overlapping a bit. We go in here, now we're sort of you can take that out as well if we want, but so I'm just removing all the on-beat things, right? So all of that conversation's going on in between the strong beats, right? That we know where the 4/4 is. So you could imagine listening into this track, and I can kind of hear the metronome without it being there. I can hear 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. There's kind of still the feel for me. And if I put this open hi-hat here, we'd have the downbeat without the kick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So this is a really good trick here. If you put that there and you've got no kicks, we can still hear where this phrase turns around, right? Helps the DJ, or it helps the listener understand what's going on here. Right, and we're not even done yet. We've still got plenty of the kit left to mess around if we wanted to keep flushing that groove out, but it kind of works, right? Already. Need to work on that synth, but that could be something that could play along with it. Good old friend, the dotted eighths. Anyway, I digress there. It was all about sort of the drum example, but we could make a nice partner to go with it. I start to think with my music head. But just here, that's a quick little demonstration of kind of everything we're looking at. The one thing I didn't add actually was ghost notes. So ghost notes, let's touch on that, and then I'm going to sign out for today. Ghost notes are kind of, this is getting close, this mid-tom here. It's where for me you are deliberately placing notes. Snare drums, kicks are often good examples, but again, there's no rule book. You can use them on anywhere, again, any sounds you like. But a ghost note, what is it for me? It's when I have something like a note like this, an extra kick, but not at full velocity, and I'm going to bring that right down to almost something like, I do sometimes look at these values here, but I'm looking for a very soft note, and it adds feeling more than anything. So if I just turn this off a little bit, take these notes out, and we put that ghost kick in. Let's turn off that synth. Right, it's almost just like a bit of a click where it currently is. And we can move it around. And sometimes those are more felt than they are heard. Just depends what you're looking for. But we can also do those on the snares as well, in this case the rim shot, but that's a ghost note for me, and use them in your hi-hat patterns, in your snares, in your kicks, things like that. If you put them in your kick drum like this, in that pattern, just make sure that if you've got a really solid bass line as well, that those two are not having an argument, that they're having a good conversation, because I wouldn't have that here if I've got a bass note there perhaps, because unless I can hear the two working, right? But it's another way to add a lot of groove in your track, is to have ghost notes. And real drummers use ghost notes. It's as I said, a very common one with snare drums and things like that, snares and kicks, you know, to have a little ghost, just little fills. And in your hi-hats, you know, we could go across here in another bar. Let's say we copy all this over into this bar here. And in this bar, let's do a 16th. hi-hat pattern like so, and then every so often let's go right down to little turning some of these into a ghost note. Right, so they're very low, and then copy that over. And so that would have a different feel to it for those little extra hi-hats in there. And you might not have as many, it might just be lots and lots of groove in there. So ghost notes, massive like little tip there as well of a way to spice things up. So I'm just going to bring this clip down. We'll have a look over to the left here. Just do a little quick recap. We just looked at the very start. We didn't get too music theory, you know, wrapped up in all that, but we looked at rhythm terms. What is a measure or measures? What are the beats? That all ties into the time signature we're in. So if you missed that, you can go back, check out the very start of today. We looked at what is a downbeat, offbeat, backbeat, upbeat, and then we sort of got stuck into what we don't want to do when we're doing rhythm and grooves, too much quantization. We learned again early in today's stream what breaks can teach us about not quantizing this beautiful live band that's played this lovely break beat, and how we can tighten it up if we want, but what we tighten up, we don't over quantize it. We keep all the special sauce in there. Too much repetition, never a good thing. We're looking for the balance in our grooves and rhythms between repetition and variation, the yin and the yang. That's right in there. Not enough dynamics, velocity. My students probably hate me for banging on about that, but I always bang on about it because as a human, we know we do not hit our instruments the same, our piano, our drums, our basses, our synths, that we do not play the keys or hit the pads or hit the skins on the drums the same hardness every single time. There's soft and hard all day long. So we need to include that in our programming. Too much on beat, that doesn't sound good at all because just everything is then accented. We already kind of probably can work out very fast with our ears the pattern of those 4 beats in this case. All elements playing the same pattern, not good either. We want conversation between things going on. And don't forget to pay attention to spaces because they're as powerful as where things live. So rests where nothing happens is as powerful. So this is getting pretty busy, but here nothing's happening at the moment. Okay, I can find in here a space where nothing happens. Pay attention to that because that is part of the conversation as well, is where you leave rests and silence, not filling. Don't have to fill everything up. It's actually, again, part of the conversation to not fill it up. We then looked over here at making better rhythms. Humanizing again ties into that, very important. Natural, not mechanical. It's too easy to do mechanical in a computer, so keep that in mind. Velocity again, we banged on about that being part of that. And then we've just looked a bit at accenting, again thinking that the kicks are a natural accent of the strong beats if we put them on all those 4 beats, but we can also accent, you know, other areas. Also putting the clap and the snare on the 2 and 4, that's accenting. But thinking about creatively using accents, you can highlight other beats, will draw people's attention to that story you're wanting to tell. Off beats we've looked at a lot because that's our key to syncopation. Different subdivisions, that's your different beat lengths, quarters, eighths, 30 seconds, 64, all that good stuff. How to make a dotted note, important for me, I like those a lot. Ghost notes, also great for adding groove, huge secret sauce. Fills or empty we didn't do yet, that's a bit more about the end of a phrase or form. Look at that in the future. And note charts as well is amazing for spicing up your beats. Swing we broke down, all of the good stuff about it, and also syncopation. And I think that's a really good starting point for now. Anything that gets over and above that starts to get into more advanced territory. Homework, try playing some stuff in with your MIDI controllers and push, record, capture, and try using that as a great platform for already all of this stuff being incorporated. Instead of programming, it's already there. The note lengths are different, the velocity is different, all of the good stuff we saw in some of these clips, it's happened because you played it, and then you can just correct and tidy up what you don't like and leave alone what you like. And if you get good at playing that stuff, it just takes practice. Most of the time, you're not even going to need to quantize it. You just leave it alone. The beauty is in exactly how it sounds. And that's important for some genres. That's enough from me. As always, thanks to those of you who joined in the stream. Dr. Bones joined late, but we'll review first half later. I think I got the overall idea. We'll need to play around with it a bit. Amazing. Great that you joined in. And thanks for your comments. Alex Moreno, great pleasure to have you with me. And thanks for joining in at 7 a.m. and with your coffee in hand and working through this with me. Great to have had you on board as well, and glad you've enjoyed the stream. Looks like you've been notepad and pencil and writing some stuff down. I hope it helps a lot. And Miri Berlin, amazing. Great to see you here as well. Thanks to you as well for dropping a comment there and being in the stream. So we are going to continue this series. Next will be bass, then we're doing harmony, then we're doing melody, and then finally a bit more advanced harmonic and melodic rhythm. So it's going to come back, but we're going to explore it later on down the track. So we've got a few weeks to get through this. My idea here is to, as I said, it came from a poll, listening to what you told me that you struggle with. This is a way of my way of trying to help you with it all. As always, a big thank you to all of you. I'll drop a video here that if you enjoyed this one, watch that one next. And of course, I'll see you in the next stream. And come and join me then. And of course, if you did enjoy the content on the channel, this video, drop a thumbs up, drop a comment, share it with a friend. Consider subscribing so you know when the next video comes out. Take care, everybody. Keep on creating. Have a fantastic rest of your weekend, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye for now. Ciao, everybody. Ciao.